Welcome to the Derek Creason Show. This is episode 9. I am your host, Derek Creason, and as always, I would love to get your feedback on the show and what you think about it and what's going on. So you can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. The handle is at Derek Creason on all those platforms, or you can go to my website, derekcreason.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there to stay up to date with what's going on. You can also go to Amazon and just search for my name, Derek Creason, or type in 20-something, and you can find my latest book, 20-something, Surviving the 10 Most Important Years of Your Life. It's available on paperback or on Kindle. So go check it out. Go check out all my socials. Interact. Give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Coming up on today's show, I have my first interview guest on the podcast. I interview a retired Army veteran who served for 20 years, Sergeant First Class Joshua King. He is a good friend of mine. I have known him my whole life since we were kids. And we got together recently, and I took the time to sit down and record one of our conversations. We had many conversations over the weekend when I was visiting him, but took the time to sit down and record one conversation for you guys. And we talked about all kinds of things. We talked about our Army careers, 20 years active duty versus 13 years in the National Guard. I think you guys will enjoy a lot of comparing and contrasting in that. We talked about deployments. We talked about who are our Army heroes. We talked about our adventures and world travels. We talked about parenting, just kind of all of our lifelong adventures we've had from when we were young kids to when we turned 18 and became grown-ups, air quotes, and moved on, and all the adventures we've had over the last 20 years. And just it was been a really fun discussion, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So enjoy the interview and let me know what you think. All right, so I'm here with Sergeant First Class Joshua King, retired, or as I just usually call him, my friend Josh. We're going to do some just hang out and talk and interview whatever, and he'll be the first guy I've ever interviewed on my podcast. So all 13 of you that listen to it can enjoy. But I thought it might be cool to do an interview from the perspective of active duty versus National Guard. So Josh has been in the Army. He just retired last summer. He did 20 years active duty. I've done 13 years National Guard. And so I thought we could kind of compare and contrast and talk about that. And then maybe talk about movies, life, parenting, anything else that comes up, John Wick, anything like that. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Trying to think, we were talking about this earlier. Your daughter Ava, we said, how long have we known each other? And the earliest I can remember was we were friends in kindergarten. But like you said, our parents were friends, so we probably hung out before that. I just don't remember that far back.
Yeah, being extremely older and wiser than you by like 2.5 months. Yeah, talking with Ava, our both of our moms were friends in high school. I'm sure from what I've heard, obviously, at that age, memory's not as super awesome. But we hung out a lot, and we'd have little baby play dates and stuff, so it was just a fun chance to slobber over each other's toys at that age.
I just remember catching poison ivy one time from your backyard when I was real young, and I was not happy about that.
I remember there's a kindergarten one day, because we moved right after that year, and we were outside and accidentally hit you in the chin with a board that was out during recess. Like, we're both lifting it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what happened, but somehow we're holding it, and, you're on one end of the beam, and I was on the other. And, I mean,
I don't remember this.
You know how it is,
right.
Like, when you're a kid, you're like, oh, this is, it was a 4x4, in reality, it was, like, just some small
spare lumber.
Trim,
That's hilarious.
But, I definitely remember that.
That's crazy. So, yeah, then you moved away, you moved to Colorado, and then we'd hang out occasionally. I remember stopping by your house on vacations. I remember flying out there one time to hang out for a weekend.
Yeah, we would always go down to Kansas City once a year, usually, be able to sit there and see you there. I flew down one time as well. Yeah, so it was just kind of sporadic.
Yeah, and that was all
timely.
That was all growing up in high school. And then I remember we made plans like, all right, let's go be college roommates, and we'll go down to Missouri State or SMSU, Southwest Missouri State back in the day. And that was our grand plan as we were finishing up high school, so we could hang out more, was to get back together and go to the same college. and then I got in and you didn't, and life drastically changed for both of us then and there.
Yeah, I definitely did not apply myself as well as I probably should have in high school. So when I did apply, they were like, yeah, we don't really need you to ever apply again.
We don't want you on the poster.
Yeah, you're not material for anyone who would probably graduate. So they took a hard pass.
Yeah, so it was like, okay. Yeah, I went off to college and you went off and joined the Army, and then that both went, and now we're here 19 years later. We're both 39, and it's just like, man, that's crazy. And you joined at 18, and then I went off and got my degree, got married, started having kids, and then I ended up joining the Army at age 25 or 26 anyways, and joined the National Guard. So yeah, that's a little bit of history, how me and Josh met. He got married at 27. I remember I got to be the best man at your wedding. That was fun. I remember getting to give my best man speech and then in pause so they could translate it into Portuguese for a lot of Luana's family. And that's nice whenever, if you ever speak and someone has to translate for you, because you get the chance to like gather your thoughts in your next sentence when you're like, what was I supposed to say? Where am I at in my notes? I lost my place.
But
did I say this already? Did I do a good job?
But did that throw you off? Because you have a script, like, you know, they talk about like public speaking or something, like, oh, you take a breath, you drink water or something,
Mm-hmm.
but then you start hearing something in a different language, and that didn't throw you off or anything?
No, not too bad, because I was like, I can't understand what they're saying, so I'm not listening to it, and just be like, just waiting for them to like pause and look at me and be like, what are you saying next? Or like, I said one sentence and you said 18 sentences. Like, I don't know how much, what are they embellishing my story or not, but like, whatever. People still laugh at my jokes in multiple languages, so that's good enough for me. So yeah, that's kind of our backstory. We've been friends forever, always hang out whenever we can. I'm up here in Baltimore right now, flew out to visit and hang out for the weekend. So how's your family doing, man? How's it like having 2 kids now?
It's different. You know, we waited a little bit longer to have kids, and we had Ava, and then we're like, okay, at some point, you know, we'll have another kid, and it just wasn't working out until, and then I was gone all the time, whether it was work or I was deployed a whole bunch. So it's kind of hard to have a kid when you're not home.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and then we ended up having a little COVID baby, which was a little bit daunting, especially looking at retiring and needing a job. You know, now, hey, you know, you just signed yourself up for some more kids and more baby stuff, and
Yep.
But it's been good. When we had Ava, I was gone for so much that she never really got fully comfortable with me till she was like 3, and so that was really rough. Whereas with Lucas, I have been home and I've never been gone except for a couple of months ago for like 4 or 5 days for work.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go back down to Kansas City.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like, you know, I've been there with him.
That's awesome that
every
you get to do that more this time around, so.
It's a double-edged sword because, you know, when I was gone, it was cool, you know, like he's going through teething, he's going through this, you know, I'd be gone. So,
right.
You know, I come home, it's kind of like the nice things.
Yeah.
But now this one, you know, I kind of get it all, but I much rather get it all than just the good stuff, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And then trying to work through and not beat yourself up for like, hey, it was my job and my responsibility to go somewhere else, and that doesn't make you a bad dad because you had to do that. It's just a different life scenario that some people have and some people don't.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just different.
It's a scenario that I volunteered to get put in.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then again, you know, it's a necessary job.
Right.
So, you know, it was a sacrifice that had to be made. And, you know, at one point, you know, my daughter and I will figure that out, and we'll talk about all that. Yeah. Luckily, she's still young. You know, she's 8, so, you know, it's not like she was getting into her teens and I was always gone. So
right, and that's something I think will be interesting to see how that plays out in my kids' lives. Since I was going to tell you, stick to the man-to-man defense with 2, and don't go into zone defense like I did with 4. It's harder, but like, so my 4 kids were, well, without birthdays, so I guess they're all would be 1 younger, but they were 13, 10, 7, and 5 during the deployment. And the older kids didn't seem to bother them that much. They kind of understood. I think the little kids are a little bit harder on. But now that I'm back from being gone for a year, that I feel like we've kind of worked through it and everyone's kind of readjusted. Oh, now we're back to a family of 6, not a family of 5 type. Mm-hmm. So, and well, I don't know, maybe there'll be some issues that come out of that. Maybe there won't. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how they remember it later on once they're older and what their opinions of it will be.
Yeah.
And maybe Ava won't remember them that much, or maybe Lucas won't even know. Oh, you were gone all the time?
Yeah. It'll be really interesting. You know, I think about like everybody else that's going through the deployments and gone. Mm-hmm. Not even just deployments, any sort of job where they're gone a lot. You know, like, you know, that has the older kids and kind of seeing how it's going to affect them, and you know, like this is an issue that a whole bunch of people have, and they're just going to continually have. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how things help with, you know, FaceTime and, you know, being able to instant message.
That was a huge tool. Like I was able to FaceTime almost every single day. The only downside was the time zones, and sometimes it wasn't convenient to talk when people were trying to get in the car and drive to school or whatever. But the technology was there, and so that was a huge bonus.
I deployed a lot, and when I was dating my wife, it was a while. We've been married for almost 12 years now, so you know we didn't have all of the technology capabilities.
Yeah.
And then
have all the phone cards, you dial the 30-digit numbers, and
right, yeah, you're sitting there and you're waiting, and then guys will go and dig those numbers out from the trash, and then prank call, and families back home, and cause drama. So like we don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. It was interesting going from that to a longer deployment that was in Africa that had a lot more better internet connectivity. I was able to talk a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And then I went to this specialized group towards the end of my career, and while I was gone all the time, I had the ability I had all of the technology at disposal. I was able to FaceTime literally almost every single day. I did at night. It was their lunch. We had lunch together,
Nice.
So it'll be interesting to see how society deals with that kind of stuff here in
another 10 years. What's going to be the next big change?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's so crazy to think like where life was when we were 18 and what you could do with Wi-Fi was just coming out in 2002 back then, and zip drives or whatever. And then now here we are 19 years later. We've got families. We've done the military. It's just like, would you have guessed back then at 18 the adventures and how life would turn out, or like any of that?
No, it's totally different. Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to get out of the house. Mm-hmm. Went for 4 years and just kept going. Never thought I'd be married, have kids, looking back at like a little 18-year-old trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life. Never would imagine that he'd be sitting here doing a podcast up here in Baltimore.
You're going to live in Baltimore, and you're going to do a podcast, and you're going to be using a Princess Sophia card table.
That Princess Sophia card table's gotten us through some days, man.
That cracks me up. All right, so let's shift gears and let's talk Army stuff. Talk about, you can kind of go through your career and maybe compare and contrast, or then maybe go through mine. We'll just kind of, it'll all free flow, however, whatever. Jump in and out as needed or whatever. But I want to make a big caveat here and throw out a joke, is that we both still have security clearances, so we won't be discussing anything classified because we're not politicians. And we don't have the special set of rules that don't apply to us. So we can still lose our jobs and go to jail for breaking those rules. But apparently politicians can't. So that's the big caveat I'll throw out. So yeah, don't say anything super secret. And anything I know that's super secret is super boring. So
yeah, there's a lot of boring stuff.
Most classified stuff is boring for all you regular people. It's just like, I don't want to know this information.
Everybody's like, oh, this is top secret. This is TS. It's like, more than likely, you're going to get incredibly bored and you're not going to care about it whatsoever.
Why is the weather report classified? All right, so Army stuff. So you enlisted in 2002?
Yep.
And where'd you do basic training? And talk about basic training, AIT, OSUP, what that is, and what was your experience and what you did? Yeah, so I joined up right after high school. I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia to... I think it's 148. No, I don't remember the basic training battalion I went 30th AG?
Well, so yeah, the in processing.
That's in processing one. Yeah.
So you go through 30th AG. It's normally a week long. You go in.
Did you go to Sand Hill or was the
Sand
infantry?
Hill.
Yeah, I was on Sand Hill too.
Yep. Yeah, you go in, the 30th AG, you do all your eye tests, this, that, you get your hair cut, you get the peanut butter shot in your butt.
Oh, that hurt so bad.
Oh, it was so much fun. And then, you get categorized to what unit you're going to by the wonderful Army sorting hat.
Yes.
You're going to Hufflepuff. Oh, great, man. Now I'm going up to Sand Hill. So when I went there, normally you have, your basic training and then your AIT, your advanced individual training.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So I went through as infantry, and so what that is known as OSUT, or one station unit training. So it's all consolidated, all together. So there's no breaks in it, and especially back then, we didn't have a bunch of liberty and passes and civilian clothes. We didn't wear civilian clothes.
So yeah, yours is just tacked on. So basic training's 9 weeks, and then so for like AIT, I went to Fort Gordon as well for basic, Sand Hill as well. And I'll talk about Sand Hill in a minute and how it's ruined me for going to the beach. But yeah, so I did 9 weeks basic training, and then I went over to Fort Gordon and did 24 weeks or 6 or 8 months for my AIT. But yours was 4 or 5 weeks added, just tacked on to the end of basic training.
I want to say 6, but
maybe 6.
I couldn't remember. And then
13, 14. So it was like 13, 14, 15 weeks just straight.
Yeah. So you just go through, and one of the nice things about the OSUT was that in basic training, you have certain set skills that you have to have done before you transition over to AIT phases. Whereas OSUT, you can kind of blend it and kind of move things around.
You could probably focus on some of it more.
Exactly, yeah. So we had a lot more range, and granted it was infantry, but like we had more range time. We had a bunch of different things, and so they weren't pigeonholed into 9 weeks. Okay, congratulations, you've all passed basic training. Now we're going to go into the AIT OSUT phase.
Right.
It's blended, which was good because you kept that focus. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we might talk about it later, but like I was a drill sergeant, so I was a drill sergeant at basic training in Missouri, and so you could see like there's a huge cultural change, and it was probably age change as well because it was 10, 12 years later. Mm-hmm. But you could see
because the kids these days are soft.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when I went through, said every Army sergeant ever.
Every guy. Like there's a big, basic training, you're really locked down. And then when you go to AIT, it's a lot more of, you're off duty. Cool. Here's your civilians. You can go do whatever.
Yeah. You can go buy Burger King. You get a little bit of freedom.
Yeah. And with OSUT, at least back then, I'm sure it might have changed. Back then, it was just straight, uniforms at all times. We had like 2 passes that whole time, and one of them was because we were getting done right before Christmas, and so it was supposed to be time to go and get Christmas presents for our families. But I just think the drill sergeants were just tired of our faces, so they're all like, "Hey, they haven't messed up, and they've already hit most of the graduating requirements. So let's just get them out of our faces for a while."
That's funny. So, like, at basic training, for people who don't know, they teach you all the basic stuff, so that's why it's called basic training. But you learn how to fire weapons, you learn about squad movements, you learn the basics of the infantry job, but they teach you just enough to know that you could do it if crap hit the fan and you do it. And then if you're not in infantry, you go off and learn other jobs like engineering, dentistry. I learned signal and computer stuff, so, like, that's not my day-to-day job in the Army. I don't do it a lot. I go to the range once every 2 years and remember all the skills that I've lost along the way. Because we definitely had people that couldn't shoot worth a darn, at the range, and the drill sergeants were like, I'm going to go on the lane next to you and help. And, they were shooting on the targets to get kids to pass to help them, obviously, because some people just couldn't shoot. But yeah, Sand Hill, oh gosh. So that was a special place at Fort Benning. And for those who don't know, the PT field where we go outside and do exercises or get smoked and do PT every morning was just like a giant volleyball field, like a sand volleyball, probably like the size of a real football field.
Yeah.
And just full of sand. And we'd go out there every morning and do push-ups, sit-ups, flutter, roll around in the sand. It gets everywhere, So then you got sand all in you all day long. Then you go do the rest of your day training. And I was there in July and August. Hot as balls, just miserable. Like, ugh. So people are like, let's go to the beach and relax. I'm like, sand is not relaxing for me. Like, it brings back bad memories.
Yeah, the Army has ruined camping for me.
Ruined camping, yeah.
I have to have a little bit of adult spirits to sit there and enjoy camping.
Yeah, people are like, let's go camping. Like, do you mean camping or Army camping? You know, because there's a difference.
I remember I was in Missouri like 8 years ago or something like that, and my brother came up and they're going to go do a float trip. Mm-hmm. And it was real close, so I got invited. I actually had the one strange day off. I was like, yeah, let's go. And they had like, you know, this commercial tent to set up and everything, and I had no idea how to set this thing up. I'm like, all right, cool. We're just gonna hang out outside, and you know, like, and like, oh no, we got this tent, and I'm sitting there trying to figure this tent out, and everybody's laughing at me.
Yeah.
I think my brother's got it.
I remember they had us out in the field one time for like 3 or 4 days, and it was just like, use your poncho to try to make some sort of shelter. They didn't tell you how to do anything. It was just go use some sticks and rope and see what you can do, you know. And then it rained like every other day, and so like all your gear was wet, and it was just miserable. And then they throw CS gas at us too all the time. And
you guys probably deserved it.
Probably, but yeah. So that's basic training, AIT stuff. Did you go up to Fort Lewis right away?
Yeah. So I graduated right before Christmas, and so everybody was already on, you know, their block leave for Christmas. So I went home, and I thought I really lucked out. They're like, oh, you know, you can do the like normally you get like a week or something. But I don't know if they still do a hometown recruiter assistance.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard of it.
And so at the time, you would go home, you report to your recruiting office, and then they would sit there and be like, hey, you know, wear uniform, go to the mall, go to the places where your friends are, you know, like...
Just talk it up.
Yeah, and I got linked in with a guy from the recruiting office there, and he was really cool because... I didn't have any friends that were there anymore, and I never really went out, so I had no idea where to go. So he was very like, man, you don't really have to use uniform. Just go some places. If anybody talks with you, they talk with you. You know, like, so it was cool. It was a nice little vacation. And I think what it was is because most of the incoming areas for units, like, they have huge holdover, especially during these block leaves, because everything shuts down, and so they weren't going to ship anybody anyways. So, you know, my awesome luck was probably just because people were lazy and they didn't want to have to deal with it. So right after Christmas, like January 2nd or 3rd, because the block leave normally goes over the 1st of January. Yeah, went up to Lewis.
Is that the second ID?
Yeah.
The big Indian patches?
Yep. Yeah, up to second ID. At the time, it was the 3rd Stryker Brigade Combat Team. And when I left 2011, 2012-ish, they rebranded to 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team. We were the first units to ever get the Strykers. Mm-hmm. For some reason, we were labeled as the 3rd. And then they changed us over to the 1st.
That sounds
about
and right. Then normal for the Army.
Yeah, and then so they changed us back because then we were the 1st, and then also it had some lineage to Vietnam, in which we were the 1st brigade of something. Not
that it mattered. I mean, was it a joint base then?
Not then.
Because I know now it's like an Air Force and an Army base.
Yeah, so you have
Lewis McChord
Air Force Base. So no, back in the day it was totally separated. I think around my 3rd tour around 2008. They started doing all the joint bases, which was great for the Army because Army bases suck.
Yes.
And they get no funding. So it just looks like, you know, not really beautiful places, let's put it that way.
I always tell people, I was like, I don't know why the Army always puts their bases on swamps and other crap holes. Where's the cheapest junk land in the States, and that's where we're going to build Army bases, and everyone you go to sucks. And then I always tell people, like, we all make fun of the Air Force, and then we all realize, crap, I should have joined the Air Force. Everything they have is so nice.
100%. So literally one exit up was the Air Force base there. And so what guys would do for the longest time was they would, on the weekends, they'd drive up to the Air Force base and they'd go eat at their chow hall because they had a whole lot nicer food. And then they changed rates, so then the Army got basically less money for food, so we couldn't do that anymore. But once it changed to Joint Base Lewis McChord, then magically all the money that was going into the separate bases all funneled into one, and it was like overnight. Like trees were planted, grass grew out of nowhere.
Nice.
You know, like it's like those cartoons, you know, where like everything's bad.
Someone waved the magic funding wand.
Yeah, and then, you know, glorious trees and rainbows and everything, you know, popped up. So
that always cracks me up. AJ in Kuwait, they have palm trees planted in the middle of the base by the sign, and I was like, the whole base is covered in sand and dirt, and then right here by the nice looking sign for all the photos, there's palm trees and grass and all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
And I was like, stop making it look like it's not a nice place.
Right, and then right outside one of the main buildings there is the only place that's actually got grass.
Yeah.
That's it. And they water it. I mean, there's a guy out there, and they take care of it because it has to look, and everything else is just
how many sergeant majors are going to fight over, like, this is my grass to guard. Yeah, so that's cool. So, yeah, I joined in 2010. I enlisted in January and then did what's called RSP program. So I went to, like, a monthly drill because I didn't ship to basic training until July. And so I went to this monthly drill, one of the armories in Kansas City, and basically they, like, gave us, like, pre-learning before basic, and we learned how to march, we learned all the ranks, we learned customs and courtesies, you know, learned all the soldier's creed, the army values, all that stuff they drill into you at basic training, and then you have to recite constantly and you forget under stress and stuff. I got to basic training in July, and that stuff was very useful. I enlisted as an E4 because I had a college degree already. Kids could use that RSP program to go from E1 to E2 and sometimes even E3 and get more rank to get more pay before they even shipped to basic training. So it was a cool little program for them. And we got there in July to basic training, and like I'd been doing that for 6 months, so I had a good head. I knew the stuff. There was guys who had enlisted 3 days earlier, you know, and just shipped and were like lost in the sauce, you know, like have no idea what's going on and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so yeah, then I finished basic and went over to Fort Gordon, did AIT for I want to say 6 months, 7 months, and then I went home. So National Guard, you do bits of active duty, and then once you've done your basic training and your AIT job, so now I'm certified as a soldier, or what we call MOSQ. You've checked the box that you're trained and qualified to do whatever job you signed up to do, and now they can plug you into a unit and you can do your job. So I finished that, and the National Guard guys, you go home. I go back to my civilian life. So I go back to my civilian job, and then you do what you see on all the posters, then the recruiters say 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And then they don't say asterisk as needed for extra stuff. But yeah, then I went back into a drilling status, and then just go to drill once a month. And then in the summer, usually in June or July, we do our 2 week annual trainings, sometimes 3 weeks. Unless you're going to go to a school or you get deployed, you're normally not doing active duty. And so that's the big difference. After that initial 8 months for me, it went back to being a part-time job that I got my health insurance through. And then I just lost a weekend a month, usually. So that's the big difference, whereas you just did it full-time, normal. And for people who don't know, people are like, oh, you live on the base, you're in the Army. Well, it's still like a 8 to 5 type job. I mean, it's more like 7 to 7, depending on the day. But,
yeah.
You know, you go to your part of the base where you work, you do your job, and then if you're not out in the field training for months on end, you go home to the barracks or your house on post or off post at the end of the day.
It depends on who you talk to. Like, because some people, you know, they're very, you know, I'm in the military. I am a soldier, or I am an airman. I am whatever, and they don't really turn off, which isn't a bad thing. But you know, they kind of give a little bit different answers of how, you know, I'm always a soldier. I'm always doing this. I'm always doing that. And then you have the other side where, no, I'm not a soldier. It's a job I do. I also...
Just a means to an end.
I have a family. I do woodworking. I do my own thing. I help people with taxes, you know, and the Army's is something I do during the day. Now, yeah, I'm deployed a lot, or I do this, but like, you know...
It's not their main source of identity or whatever.
Yeah, so I think depending on who you talk to, you get drastically different answers based on their personalities.
Absolutely. I think I talked about that once before, maybe in my book. It was like, it's very subjective. Like, you can go talk to 5 different Army people, and they will have 5 different armies to tell you about, you know, like even, because I'm in the signal world, you're in combat arms world, you know, what if you're in chemical or ordnance or intel or whatever, your experiences are going to be drastically different, even from unit to unit, like how they operate and stuff. So I also think it's really cool that it's also different, but it's a very small world. Like, I'm sure this has happened to you, but you'll run into someone. I went down to Arkansas for a training, and I ran into a friend from AIT that I hadn't seen in like 7 years. You'll run into people on other sides of the world, just crossing paths at army places and stuff. And it's just like, it's such a small. It's a big army, but it's a small community. Like it's kind of neat.
100%. I mean, so a part of my career, I was an instructor at a combat engineer school, which is drastically different, but not drastically different from like infantry. Like it's not normal, right? So I'm over there being an instructor, and out of nowhere, there's an infantry cat that comes over, and he starts working. I mean, just totally out of craziness. And then 5-6 years later, 2-3 different units later, I go to this other unit, and my troop sergeant major just so happens to be really good friends with this guy. Like it's such a large world, but so small all at the same time. If you're a good dude or dudette, whatever, your name carries.
Yeah.
Across.
Reputation's big in the military. Good or bad, it'll follow you for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk deployments. How many have you done, and what were your favorite ones or not favorite ones, or where are some of the interesting places in the world you got to go? I know you've done a lot more than I have. I just got my first one done.
You'd think that I know off the top of my head. It's 7 or 8. Let's do the math. Dora the Explorer, or no, Blue's Clues.
Blue's Clues.
Let's Blue's Clues this. So I did 3 in Iraq. Then I did 1 in Africa. I went back to Iraq, so we're at 5 now. Did Afghanistan 6, and then areas in the Middle East for 7.
Yeah.
So seven deployments, and in those rough locations.
Were they all like the traditional 12 to 15 month deployment, or were some of them shorter with some of the later ones that you did with some of the high speed stuff?
I did 3 deployments with the unit up in Fort Lewis, and they were 12, 15, and then another 12 months.
Yeah.
So we got extended on our second deployment an additional 3 months.
I'm sure that made everyone real happy.
Yeah, and that was a really rough one too. Like, it was great because as soon as you extended, like, you get an additional 1,000 or 1,500 texture. Like, I mean, it was great, but the extension part of it was where we moved to a different location and we saw most of our combat. So we had a lot of guys that got injured or killed on that last portion of it. So that
sucks.
Kind of was rough.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of what it was back when the surge. We were already over there and we were doing good things, and they're like, all right, you guys need to go take care of this, and we did, but yeah, it sucked. So those were the 12 and 15ers. Africa.
Did you go to Djibouti?
Yeah, I was up in Djibouti. So we were part of the East African Response Force, EARF.
Who comes up with these acronyms? That's
right.
Awesome.
It's like Mike Tyson saying it, EARF. Don't beat me up, Mike Tyson. So yeah, we were there in total response of the 18 hours? What was that movie?
Oh, 13 hours?
13 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were total, we were there as...
For Benghazi stuff.
Yeah, from the Benghazi. So we're located there, so that way if there's any issues that would arise in embassies within the area, we had a certain size element that could easily
QRF
flex to go and help support and do that. And we had several potentials, but nothing really occurred. So it was a lot of working out, training, just drills.
It's like, I think deployments in general are kind of like the all or nothing. They're either high tempo or it's like prison time. It's just slow time. Like, what can you do to keep your mind busy so you're not losing your mind?
Oh, yeah. And I could go on for hours about how difficult it is to keep people focused and within that. Because that was one of the biggest issues I had in Africa was, I was a platoon sergeant. So, working with these guys. And, some of them, were just like, they're getting ready to get out when they come back. Or, they just have this... And I get it. I was young too. Like, before I had my first contact, it was just like, all right, what are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. All right.
Like, it could get real fast.
Exactly. So trying to keep them on point and be like, hey, look, man, like, we could get called up right now. Like, tomorrow we could get called. Like, this is why we're doing it. And, for some it was difficult. Others, it was really good. Like, they were they bought into it. They did what they, what they had to. But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly difficult, trying to navigate, because you do have this. It's all or nothing. And sometimes, it changes halfway through. Like my second deployment, the one that was extended, like the first half, I mean, we did some stuff, but like it wasn't a lot, like it wasn't crazy. And then the second half was like, it was going. Yeah, that, and then the other units, the other group that I went and worked for, I did a 6 month in Iraq, and then it was only like 2 months for the next one, and then the following one was 3 months, I think.
So some shorter ones.
Yeah, and it was good, but I mean, it was difficult, and it was timely.
But those were more high op tempo too ones, probably.
Yeah, it was, and it was a lot of you're out there, you're trying to find work, So we got in, and like, hey, look, we need you here because of A, B, C, and you're like, okay, cool. So you start doing A, B, and C, but you're like, man, I'm really curious. I'm gonna go make friends, and then I'm gonna go find some night work. Is what we would call it, or at least what I would call it. And you try and find things that you can maybe assist or influence, or In fact, when I was in Iraq for 6 months, that interest in doing some night work was what got me picked out of my unit to go and be the team lead for my last trip.
Nice. That's
there.
Cool.
So it was like busy, but it was slow, but we were in Afghanistan. We got contact like the day before we left. Like it's just different.
So all that is completely different. Like as we mentioned earlier, like from my deployment, I'm in a signal unit and I'm at the division level. So, way up above the brigades and the battalions and the line units. I went to good old Southwest Asia, as they like to call it, SWA, in Kuwait and Jordan, and we had people in 5 different countries over there for Task Force Spartan Shield or whatever, and some ongoing mission that you can go look up on Wikipedia, and how we're building relationships over there, blah, 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 blah. You can read into my opinion on that however much you want, but and I went it was for up to 400 days, but it was a 12-monther deployment. We got home at like 11 and a half months, depending on what time and what wave and how fast you got through demo. But so I was gone 11 months, but we went down to Texas for pre-mob stuff, and that was right when the Ukraine war kicked off. And so we're like, how is this going to affect what's going on? So we were watching the news constantly, because we're like, hey, we're on deployment. We weren't going to EuropeCom, we're going to CENTCOM, but like that's still pretty close. Like if they needed to divert stuff up there, and all of our planes, a lot of our gear got delayed getting over to the Middle East.
Shocking.
Because a lot of the planes got routed to move stuff that direction. And so my specific job, I do IT stuff in the military because I'm a computer geek. That's what I do in the real world too. My equipment got delayed and didn't get there till I got in country March 1st. My equipment didn't arrive till April 18th or something. So I had 6 weeks of nothing to do right away, other than look busy, help out. But I got enough rank that people aren't going to go, hey, go do this, go do that. They're going to leave Chief Warrant Officer alone. They'll ask, and I would help out whenever.
I've got warrant officer things to do.
Yeah, that's a common response. They're like, I got chief stuff to do, and they're like, what does that mean? It means leave me alone. Ours was very low tempo. We're doing signal support missions, or we're the middle managers between ARCENT and the 35 line units underneath the division, and so we're tasked from ARCENT all day, and people are doing meetings all the time, and the red, the green, the spreadsheets, the slides, and all that stuff. I was responsible for maintaining this set of equipment that we use in the field, but we never went out to the field. It was to be there in case we needed to go jump into a fight somewhere. That's what that's for. It's designed to go set up a mobile command post and do all that stuff. But since we didn't do it, it's essentially a backup system to the infrastructure in place. And so I got to work on it a little bit, then I got to babysit it and just be ready for basically 9 months. So that was very challenging for me. I was very frustrated because I'm a very highly driven and motivated person. I like to achieve things. I've done well in IT, both on the civilian side and the military side, and I felt like I just wasn't being utilized to my potential. I was like, I have a lot of potential and knowledge, and I got to go train some guys down at another base for a week, but that was just 5 days, and so I was frustrated that I wasn't getting to be used to my full potential and having to be away from my wife and kids. I was like, if there's purpose and intent and mission and good stuff going on, I'm gung-ho, I'm all there, I'm ready to be a team player. But you take that away and I just have to do some busy work, I didn't have the best of times. And so it was probably more hard mentally than physically, because like I didn't go out and do any combat. We did the air raid sirens like one time maybe. Go sit in the bunkers one time up in Jordan, and we weren't worried about anything up there. But yeah, so my experience is vastly different. You can go talk to anybody, but I would encourage anybody, if you know someone and if they're willing, go ask them about it, go talk to them about it, hear their stories, and we'll talk about some more stories later. But you'll hear about a lot of cool people and a lot of cool stories, and just there's a lot of hilarious prank stuff that goes on in the Army. There's adventures of like, oh, we snuck out of here and we drove over there and we went and did this and we probably shouldn't have done that, but we got away with this, and all types of shenanigans. Or so-and-so borrowed, air quotes, borrowed this, and we got the guide on from them. Or so-and-so, the story that came out on Reddit and was very popular about that happened at Kuwait, the captain who motorboated a female.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big source of gossip while we were deployed there. And I was like, oh my God, just go Google it. It was a big HR nightmare in the Army. And just, you're like, I can't believe this stuff happens, but only in the Army would that kind of stuff happen.
Right.
You're just like, what? Okay. Some people will just make really bad decisions. That's the other thing, yeah. So whenever one person makes a mistake in the Army, that's where all the rules come from. And they'll be like, since you made that mistake, now we're taking this privilege away from the whole Army, and you never shall get this privilege back. And people ruin it for everyone.
Everybody suffers.
Everybody suffers. Group punishment. It's always group punishment. Okay, so that was deployments. All right, so we decided we're going to skip talking about weapons because that's another whole nerdy subculture that we could go into for hours. And just suffice it to say that if you want to play with cool weapons, go join the military, and especially go infantry. You'll get to play with a lot of cool stuff.
Lots of cool things.
I only shot some cool weapons at basic training just for familiarization. Like I was telling Josh, they let me throw a hand grenade. That was pretty cool, which was way louder than I ever thought they would be when they go off. I thought it was artillery. It was so loud. Suffice it to say, yeah, lots of cool weapons in the Army, because that's one of their main purposes is destroying things. So that reminded me of a funny story. We were talking about group punishment. So I was at Warrant Officer Basic Course, and like every Friday, the battalion commander would come out and give a safety brief at PT and be like, hey, the normal stuff on Friday. Don't drink and drive. Don't hit your wives, whatever. And then they went into this, and they'd be like, we had a situation in one of the schoolhouses where someone destroyed a bathroom and did not clean it up, and or like someone had a bathroom emergency and like did not make it all into the toilet, but all over the wall and the floor, but then did not clean it up. And so they were like, we started an investigation and we're trying to keep it at the lowest level, but it's already up to a full bird. And I was like, we were literally getting briefed at the safety brief on, you must learn to crap in the toilet and not on the floor.
That sounds
and
right.
It was a lieutenant colonel who was giving the brief, but I was like, this is amazing. I'm getting lectured on how to take a dump correctly.
Right?
Only in the Army.
It's amazing. It's amazing the things that people will do.
I just thought it was funny. I was like, who are they going to catch? Or what are you going to get written up for? The great poop bandit. I didn't look it up or whatever, but I thought if we wanted to, it was like, do you ever get any cool awards along the way?
I guess that would be a matter of perception. Mm-hmm. So I never really cared about awards. I mean, I've gotten awards for deployments or, certain things for certain firefights and things like that. But I've never really cared, I guess. Mm-hmm. So we were in Afghanistan. We had a big event that happened. Our troop commander was National Guard. He was on ADOS, mm-hmm. right? So he was doing active duty time. The man's been around. He's done a lot, but he's just never been able to check that block for the combat infantry badge, CIB.
Oh, yeah.
So when that happened, I knew exactly what was going on. And when I was able to, I was taking pictures, getting the proof.
Yeah.
So we could submit it, and he can get what he deserved. Because he's deployed a lot. He's deployed with a lot of big name units. Like, it just never happened for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sat there. We came back. We submitted this stuff, and
I think that's the cool part. Is we've put people in for awards like when they deserve it, and like that's awesome. I'm trying to get people awards. That part's cool.
We submitted it all, and because of some really small fine print out there, they're like, "Oh, well, he doesn't qualify for it," because basically how our unit was organized, it didn't fall underneath the traditional infantry unit, and so because of that, even though he did all of this stuff,
I thought that was MOS
that
based.
qualified, and so that's what I assumed as well. So he fit that bill, but you also have to be under orders within a specific.
Well, that's dumb because people get attached to stuff all the time. Like I was in a cab unit for a while, and I was like, and people were like, "Oh, you're a warrant in a cab unit? What do you fly?" And I'm like, "I have computers."
Yeah.
I don't fly the helicopters.
Yeah. It's like overreach and overassume, and so we put it in, and they didn't get it.
Frustrating.
But we were put in for awards for it, and I come to find out, it was from him. Mm-hmm. Like he thought that we deserved it, and so it until I realized that it was from him, I was really mad about it because I was like, that was not the purpose of that. It was not for us. It was only for him. Like it was me and it was another guy, and we had a contractor, but the contractor, it's different,
mm-hmm.
So like they don't get the awards the same way, so on and so forth. But like the whole thing was to take care of him, and then he didn't get what he deserved, and then we end up getting this other award, and so like and then learning that it was from him,
mm-hmm.
Like he thought that the actions that we did we deserved, and so it meant something, but it wasn't what was intended. And
right.
I think that's what I've seen throughout my career. So I'm very jaded on awards. My first tour, we had a really long firefight, and it was 8 or 10 hours long. There was a Kiowa that was shot down in a city north in Iraq. And it was a lot. It was a big deal. And so our small scout platoon at the time were the only ones on the ground in this area holding off everything. We secured the crash site, helped grab the pilots. Like it was a big thing, and so we were supposed to be put in for really, because there's such a small group of us,
mm-hmm.
These higher awards. Well, the rules at the time, you had to be certain ranking for this. From that on, that was this kind of like, oh well, awards don't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
And when I became an NCO, I started putting my guys in. And then, so I was at least trying to get the right awards to the right guys. But
I would think, I would say a lot of people probably resonate with your opinion on it. I know I'm kind of jaded on awards too. When I was young, I tried to chase them, and I graduated distinguished honor grad from AIT, best of the best of the whole battalion, and I didn't get any award for it, and I got real butthurt about that because I knew people who were graduating honor grad from other schools and getting all kinds of stuff, and I was like, what the heck, man, and so I think the idea is good on paper, and we should be recognizing, and there are some people who do get correctly identified and given awards, but I think the system as a whole probably struggles and fails. It's somewhat more of a good old boy system than it should be, maybe, or officers giving each other candy back and forth, that kind of thing. And I think a lot falls through the cracks more than it should, unfortunately. And it makes a lot of us become very jaded. Or in this last deployment, everybody got an award. We called them participation trophies, and so you could have one for the deployment. Because back in the day, National Guard was deploying more, but now not as much. That's kind of dwindled down a lot. And so they wanted to make sure everyone got an award because this might be their only deployment.
Yeah.
And I was like, but awards are given for people who go above and beyond the regular call of duty, in my opinion. And I didn't want a participation trophy award. Yeah, sure, I'd like it to add to my records or whatever and get another ribbon. Cool, but I didn't want a participation trophy award. They told me to write an award for a guy that I had trained, and he sat in our section, and I held off and told him no for a long time until I got into a discussion with the commander, and they made me do it. But I was like, he didn't earn it. He didn't do anything to earn an award. And I was like, and neither did I. I don't want it. I don't want an award that says I did X, Y, Z, because I didn't do anything above and beyond. I did what was required of me, but I didn't have opportunities to excel, because it just wasn't. It doesn't always play out like that. Like if we had 300 or 400 people in the division deployed, like there was not 400 people who went above and beyond. Maybe 5 or 10 of them, probably, for sure. Everybody, no. And so I think a lot of us end up jaded on the whole system.
Yeah, you see these awards go to people that don't deserve them, or they have like these super stringent rules, that, you can only be a certain rank to receive a certain award, or a certain position to receive, and it's like, if somebody is doing something that warrants that award, that shouldn't be capped, and, I'm sure even outside the military, people see the same things, all over the place. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at with awards.
Let's talk about education. I know we've both used the military to get degrees. I don't know if a lot of people know that. I know a lot of people think people join the National Guard for college money, and that's true. A lot of people do that, but the military is very pro-education. They're very bureaucratic about it, but they're very pro-education. The military has tons and tons of schools that they'll send you to for military training, and some of them may have relevant civilian transfer stuff, some of them may not. But as you go, especially if you get into the officer ranks, you have to have college degrees, legit college degrees, to go past the rank of captain and major. You've got to have a bachelor's degree, or you got to have a bachelor's degree in general to become an officer. And if you want to go past major, you've got to have a master's degree. So they're very pro-education, and they have programs out there, like people have heard of the GI Bill, and what's the other one? Post 9/11 GI Bill, Montgomery GI, all tuition assistance, all these programs to help people get degrees. But there's definitely a lot of paperwork in it for sure. So in my case, I already had a bachelor's degree when I enlisted, and so I never thought about it, because I swore after getting that degree I would never ever go back to college. I was done with school. And then 7 years later, I was like, I can get this money to pay and have the military pay for a master's degree, so I don't have to pay for it. I was like, well, I was like 27 at the time. I was like, well, I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon, so maybe this will look good on the resume and help me get more money to retire faster. So I did tuition assistance and GI Bill, and that covered, I went to some online university out of California and did 2 nights. I wish it was 2 nights. 2 years of school at night, and so 2013, 2015, I did my master's degree and slogged through that after coming home from work and putting the kids to bed and just writing papers. Ugh. But it was there, and I did it, and I'm glad I did it, and I learned some stuff that was relevant to my career. So that was my experience with it. The paperwork was a pain. I think they constantly change the rules and the how-to and the systems to make people not want to do it. You definitely have to go after it and spend some time on it. That was my experience with it. What was your experience with it?
Yeah, so, I joined up right after high school. I was a drill sergeant in Missouri, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to get out of the Army. I'm not getting promoted. I had this woe is me attitude. Why is this guy getting promoted and I'm not? Instead of sitting there going, what is this guy doing that I should be doing? I had this huge mental issue that I had to overcome. And, talked to my wife, and then our stories, our recollection of events differ a little bit. But what ended up coming out was like, hey, why are you going to try and get out of the Army when you have nothing marketable? You don't have anything, you don't have an education. Infantry is cool, but, how is that going to translate and transfer over to civilian world? And it sucked, because that was, my last time to re-enlist. It was in def at the time, so I had to stay in till, retirement, basically, unless there's, extenuating circumstances. I was like, okay, cool, I got to start doing some college. And started doing the night college, and this was as a drill sergeant, and then I was a sapper leader course, combat engineer school instructor, which I worked more there than I did as a drill sergeant.
If that's possible to comprehend.
It's ridiculous.
For those of you who don't know, drill sergeants work like on average probably 18 to 22 hours a day. Like they are there. I don't know when they leave or why they leave to go home, but they're there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go into work to wake the kids up at like 4-ish, and then, they get put down 8, whatever, still finishing up stuff, and then I'd go home and I'd turn around and separately, of course, I worked even more, but it was more fun. It was more adults, I'd sit there and, just start taking some courses, and it took a little bit longer to get done with my bachelor's, the first year or two with those hours. So it was a 4-year degree. I think it took like 5, maybe. In the beginning, it took me a little bit to ramp up. I hated school, and then I'm doing this online. So it took a lot longer than to get into the swing of things. But then once I was going, in between meetings, breaks, whatever, I was sitting there just knocking out college. I got my bachelor done. I waited a year. It was pretty much like a year to that month, and then I started my master's. And at that point, I was in Africa, or right before I went to Africa.
I forgot you went back and got your master's too.
Yeah. So I went and I did that, and then when I was in my other group, I was doing it all the time. And so what I would do, because I felt guilty from being gone all the time, is I would wait until everybody would go to sleep. Mm-hmm. And then I would turn on my computer and I'd do work. And so that way, I felt like I was giving as much as I could to the family while they were awake. And I mean, I remember in my old unit, in that group, we did a lot of civilian travel. And so we stopped in, where is it? With the Burj Khalifa, Dubai.
Oh, yeah.
So we were there for like 2 days, coming out of theater, waiting to go over, and we had to pad it to make sure we had travel in and out and everything. So we had a layover, day and a half, 2 days, and so like we'd go down, and we're eating dinner there, and the only place you could have alcohol or beer or whatever is at the hotel. So we'd sit there, we'd eat and everything, and then they're like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go over to this other place, go do karaoke, or whatever, and keep
just to hang out and
enjoying it and partying and enjoying the nightlife. I was like, hey, cool, man. All right, I'm going to go upstairs and continue writing this paper I got to do, so there was a lot of sacrifices in things, and, not just, friendships, but,
it's a lot of time. It's a lot of work.
Family, yeah. So it definitely understood. I waited forever to start college because I was like, I don't have the time, And then I looked back and I was like, dude, I got off of work. I ate dinner, at like 5 something, whenever the chow hall was open when I lived in the barracks. And I did nothing all night until I got to get up the next morning.
Watch some TV.
So much time. Maybe I could go to the gym again in the evening or something. But I had so much time, and I just wasted it. And so that was a really good drill to learn.
You can be focused and disciplined when you want to be, if something's important.
Yeah, if something is important enough, you find the time. Whether
absolutely
it's incremental times during the day, or you just have to wait till everybody's asleep.
Yeah, or get up super early, or
Yep.
I think we learn a lot of discipline in the military, that when we learn to focus it, it's a very valuable tool that we can focus and grind out something hard, difficult, challenging, long, whatever it may be, that people in the civilian world may not have had that type of experience to be able to funnel and focus on something. I think it's a skill that you have to learn, and I think the opportunity is more readily available in the military. Not everybody gets it and picks it up, but if you can learn, and this is why you see all those motivational speakers and stuff, they've figured it out, and they're trying to funnel it and empower and motivate other people, but not everybody figures that out, or if they do, it's at different times in their life.
If you really just sit down and break apart your day, you realize that you have a lot of time on your hands. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got different situations. Somebody could be like, oh, I'm married, I've got 6 kids, I've got this, I get it. I do. But a majority of people, they have a whole lot more time on their hands than they think that they do. And it's not like, okay, if you're a private, an E4, you're a specialist, you're whatever, you live in the barracks and you don't do anything when you're off work. Like I get it, you're in the military, you have to go to the field and stuff like that. But with technology now and so much going on with online colleges, most of the stuff you're going to go through with the education benefits, it's all military together. Like they're linked really, really well with good support. So like you'd be like, hey, look, I got to go out to the field for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. Like they're going to understand. They're going to try and push you stuff before, a little bit afterwards. You still probably maybe take a hit because the automated system has to have. But like they understand.
Yeah, and they'll work with you.
Yeah, or, like I had one that sat there and they're like, hey, look, man, like this automated system, it has to be done by this, or you're going to automatically receive 10 percentage points off or whatever. But on the end, if you do an additional paper of whatever, I'm going to give you extra credit for those. Like they work. So there's so many different ways. Like if farting around.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people they're just comfortable in whatever they're at, and they if I worked hard to succeed, the fear of success holds them back, because like, oh, well, then I'd have to work hard or be driven, and they're comfortable, got creature comforts, and they don't want to put in the effort to get the reward.
Exactly. And the way I see it is a lot of the people that are comfortable, right? You have a small group of people that are comfortable because they hit all the blocks that they wanted to, like you were talking, you've hit a lot of the boxes mm-hmm. of where you want to be, with your military service. So you're like, I could just walk away and I'm fine. Like you're in that comfortable spot.
Yeah.
But a lot of people that I've talked to, and I was one of them, back in the day, it was like, I'm comfortable where I'm at, but I'm gonna whine and I'm gonna complain because of A, B, and C. If someone else that's getting promoted, or someone else that's doing this, or someone else can do this,
They project and externalize a lot of it.
And I'm like, so you're not comfortable being who you are. You're just being lazy.
And not wanting to fix it.
Yeah. And so, like I don't have a problem if people are comfortable because they are where they want to be at. But if someone is sitting there and they're thinking of like, yeah, I'm comfortable, I just want to sit here and play video games, I want to do this, I want to do that, but then I'm going to sit there and complain in some way or shape or form about somebody else, or where I'm not doing this or that, then that's where I have the problem.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I got like maybe 2 or 3 more things we can talk about, and we'll wrap it up. So maybe 20 more minutes, I don't know, if we're good to keep going. Let's talk about like who's like inspired and motivated you along the way in the military. A couple years ago, I got to go see Marcus Luttrell speak and David Goggins speak, and they're pretty well known in the military culture. They're big, cool, tough team guys and stuff. But they had some kick-ass stories, like it motivates you, like, and that's all cool, but not super personal. Like, I don't know them personally. They're not my friends. I know of them. And I'll talk about more like who inspires me in a minute. If you want to, would you tell me about Benjamin Wise? Do you want to talk about him? If you're cool with that?
Yeah.
Because I know he's important to you. I've heard you talk about him to me before a little bit. I read his brother Bo's book, The 3 Wise Men. So I've learned more of his story, and about him. But I want to hear from you. Tell me what he meant to you as a friend, a teacher, a leader, a brother, and how he's inspired you. You've told me some of that before, and I've written about it some on my blog, but for maybe people who don't know any of that.
Yeah, so when I went to our scout platoon in 2003, Ben was he was a scout team leader, and at the time, so they recently reorganized and they're creating this Striker Brigade combat team. So they're still trying to figure out, like what's important for duties within platoons and stuff. But like he was the only one that went through was ARSLIC. It was an Advanced Reconnaissance School, right? Advanced Reconnaissance Leadership School course.
Sounds like Pathfinder stuff, but
no. So this was a lot of people term it as the was it the 4th phase of Ranger School or something like that. Like, I mean, it's heavy weight on you, moving far distances, being sneaky, being smart, being able to do things with being tired, beaten down, being able to pull back and free. And back then, it was it was a lot of like, hey, here's 100 different slides of different tanks and helicopters and stuff, and like you had to try to memorize.
Oh gosh,
dude, it was a lot of rote memorization
tough,
on top of everything else.
When you're tired,
yeah. And so like he was the only guy in our battalion that was that. So it was very unique. He was great. He was very quiet. He was a quiet guy. He never boasted about anything. You know, we got in contact quite often in that deployment, and he was always very cool, very, calm, and he was very religious, but like he never really like talked about things, right? So he never preached to anybody. He never thought he was better than anybody else. He would still hang out, have a beer here and there, so like he didn't have like this pious,
I'm better than you,
better me. So that was like my first example of like, you could be religious or have theology in your life and still do the military. You could meld them together. I remember when we got back from that deployment, he was like, I'm going to go Special Forces. A lot of guys back then, when you would do it, everybody would know. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going SF, I'm going selection, like they tell everybody about it and they make it very, very, out there. And he never did. Like he would just go, like he'd almost sneak out, and you just catch him afterwards of doing like this ruck march for like 20 miles. And like, you'd have to talk him into figuring out how long he went, how far he went, how much, like, cause he just, he's just like, I'm just going to go do this thing and I'm just going to go do it. And that's kind of how he was.
Very humble.
Yeah. He's very humble. And he was just very, very, very down to earth. And like, he would talk to you like if he was your team leader, like you would still have the common courtesy, military courtesies and, respect, but, he'd sit there and he'd talk to you like a person.
Yeah.
And then, he's just he was authentic. He would sit there and he'd talk to you about things. If you wanted to talk about religion, after a little bit he would, because, we've all been in those situations where somebody will want to talk about religion for some ulterior motive,
Right, or they've got a point they want to make. And
yeah, like, they want
a story
you to say
they want to
something.
tell. Or
Yeah, like when you have a conversation with somebody and you can tell that they're not listening to you, they're just waiting their turn, and he just was not like that. And I met his brother once. Actually, he came up to the barracks. He stayed with him for like the weekend. The
Bo or what's the other one's name? I know his name. Gosh,
I know.
I'm drawing a blank.
It's not Bo. The Navy SEAL. He was going through buds at the time.
Yeah, I know his name.
And
Gosh,
he was even cool.
Yeah.
Like they were just a quiet family, very respectful. They had their beliefs, and they were just somebody that you just wanted to, kind of emulate.
Yeah.
And then I remember he went through selection. He came back, and a lot of guys, when they would go through selection, they come back and they're like, "Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah." And he was just very. He's like, "Oh yeah, man, I got lost at this one thing, but I ended up coming through. My feet were all messed up. I had them all wrapped up in moleskin and tape, but I was able to get through. And he was just very humble.
Yeah.
I met him. He went up to the Special Forces group up there, first Special Forces group up.
Was he married and had his family yet then, or was that before that?
No, that was all before.
Okay,
it was all before. And then we kind of parted ways a little bit because then he started going through the pipeline. The dude was wicked smart. So he got.
You tell me he got medical.
Yeah, he got 18 Delta medic, which
That's tough.
It's like a year and a half of training specifically for that. They do like hospital rounds. I mean, they do all this, and then he got like Mandarin Chinese for language because SF guys, they go through language training. So it's like one of the hardest languages you can do. I think he was working on Farsi as well, just for fun.
For fun.
The dude was just wicked smart, So he was gone for a long time. He came back, did a deployment or two, and I remember I just ran into him, and he was getting like wine, this little shop. They would do like these little like cheese and wine tasting, We're like, okay, cool. Like my roommate, I was like, let's just go, dude. And we went through like a little wine phase, and we went in there, and he's just there, and the dude just just stacked, like just in shape, and and I've seen him in forever, and he's just like, hey Josh, and then it was just like nothing ever stopped, and I think the the greatest thing about him that I always take away is that, he had that authentic humbleness where he really cared about people. And I mean, you've read the book. You understand some of the people that he's dealt with and he's talked with. Yeah. And I mean, the dude really cared. He cared about everybody, even if it was people he didn't get along with in the platoon or the team. Like, I mean, he was there. And, it's hard to find.
Yeah, I picked that up from the book, that he was just authentic, just a good human being. But then also that he was just what reminds me of you, just like a down-to-earth, just goofy guy. Yeah, he'd play the guitar, he'd play football. What can we do to goof off? Or, how can we wrestle around and beat each other up or whatever? And just that there was a lot of that, just down-to-earth, just goofy, have fun, but then also the authenticness and the humbleness. And I know for me, it's you think you understand some of that kind of stuff, and some of that stuff you just don't learn until you're later in your 30s, and we're almost to our 40s now. I'm just now learning these last 2 years, I can be authentically me, and that's going to be good enough for people. Stop trying to project an image or what I think or what I think people want to see about me and stuff. But I definitely picked that up from reading the book about him, that he was authentic, and it seems like he was just a regular down-to-earth guy, just a family man. He really cared about his wife and his kid. Just a normal guy, just doing the best at whatever came his way. And he's like, I'm just gonna go do it. I'm gonna crush it. It's sad that we lost him. He got wounded and died later from his injuries, and I know that's hard. We both know people that we've lost along the way. That's one of the big downsides of the Army and the military, and that sucks hard. In my mind, that's what makes him a hero. Not that he died, I don't want anybody to die, and sometimes that just happens, that's part of the job. But the fact that he was just a regular, down-to-earth guy, doing the best he could at whatever came of him, being authentically humble, what more could you ask for from manhood, from fatherhood, from a soldier, a leader, that's it,
Yeah, and that goes in theosophical or whatever, talks, you look through history and you look at the good leaders, like the amazing ones, and obviously you're talking about history, so everybody's dead, obviously, right. But you talk through military type stuff. A lot of the people that they talk about, they don't die of old age, they die on the battlefield, and so it's never a good thing, mm-hmm. But
dying with honor. Yeah, you see that concept. A lot of warriors talk about that, and you want to die well, live well, but also die well.
Yeah,
with honor.
There's some guys that are out there that went through some things and are very capable in being able to tell their stories and influence and motivate. Like Luttrell and Goggins, and mm-hmm. And so that's great. But throughout military culture, the people that have, chow halls named after them, their names on the walls, it's not, for a long time, it's not guys that, won Soldier of the Month,
right.
board or something, it's like guys who served in that unit that have,
they gave their everything.
Basically, to it, yeah. And, and so their stories are told down time. It's like the scene in Troy, with
Brad Pitt,
and, he's talking to a little kid in the beginning. He's like, oh, you're going to go out there? And he's like, well, that's why no one will ever remember your name, And so these guys, they go out there, they just want to live their life, and they live an amazing life. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ben on his block leaves in between deployments, he'd be like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go with my church to this mission trip, and I'm going to go do some mission trip stuff through the church on my leave.
Very selfless. Yeah.
And everybody else is like, oh man, I've got all this money from,
I'm gonna go buy a car.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Vegas, and do some questionable thing. No one's gonna remember that guy, mm-hmm. but they're gonna remember the guy that sat there and genuinely cared about people. And it would have been great to sit there and see how far he would have gone.
And I bet you his influence has expanded greatly because of that. I bet if I went and met 10 people who knew Ben and said, hey, same question, tell me about Ben, they would probably tell very similar stories, and be like, that kind of humble authenticity, that's how you gain influence. You don't gain influence by using your influence. You gain your influence by not using it, but people knowing, hey, if I need something or I need help, that's the guy I'm going to. He's dependable. He's reliable.
Yeah. So it's like, so the two people I draw on is Ben, and then, I don't know if you heard of him, Adam Brown.
It's not drawing it.
Okay.
Ringing a bell.
So this guy was legit, right? So he was a Navy SEAL. And, I mean, he came from a questionable background, but he had, like, a religious upbringing. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, and he was very quiet, reserved. He had some issues growing up, going through puberty and, doing kid stuff, but he ended up joining the Navy, became a SEAL, and then he had drug issues that came back up, because I think he had drug issues prior. And he thought he fixed it. Then he joined, became a SEAL, and then he had like more, like where he went home on leave, and like I think he was married at the time. He just disappeared for like 3 or 4 days because he went home and got hooked up with one of his other dealers and went to like a crack house or something like that.
Fell back into some bad stuff.
Yeah. He went back in and came back, and like he was really remorseful. Like, so I mean, this guy was always fighting demons, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to say like he was just married, or he's with like a very serious girlfriend at the time, who ended up becoming his wife. And she's like, "You're never doing that again," blah, blah, blah. And he never did after that. He had some issues back and forth. He would call or whatever. And so they have a book about him called Fearless. Okay. Last I read, they're actually doing a movie, which of course is going to be horrible, because movies and books never work very well.
Right.
But I hope they tell the story and they're able to encompass it. I mean, Lone Survivor was pretty accurate with the book. Mm-hmm. The ending was slightly a little off, but right. I think they did really good justice to that. So I hope that they're able to do the same thing with Fearless. But I mean, this guy just always had something that was going wrong with him. Like you go home, he get caught up in all that stuff. He had a vehicle rollover accident that crushed all of his bones in his hands. So he had to sit there and teach himself to shoot with his non-dominant hand, and that became it. And then, let's backtrack. So he went over to SEAL Team 6. So their premier special ops team.
Good old DevGru.
DevGru.
All the books and shows and movies are about.
Yeah, yep. And so he went over there, then he got in an accident. So already he's at the top of his game. He's amazing. Had a vehicle rollover accident overseas, crushed everything in his hand. He had to rebuild it all, so he had to sit there and get all that strength back while he sat there and taught himself how to shoot offhand. So like he was just like, okay, well, this is my life now. And the dude did that. Then he had another issue where he was doing training, and they're doing sim rounds, simulation rounds. Normally it's like paintball guns, basically, right?
Yeah. They don't feel great, but
they don't. And somehow, so you wear eye protection, eye pro. Well, a round hit near his eye. Anyways, he lost eyesight in one of his eyes. But it was his dominant eye. So then he had to teach himself off of his non-dominant eye, and all the while, he still stayed within the SEAL Team 6 DevGru team, and he stayed operational. He just kept doing it. And there's a real powerful thing. He went, in the book, they're sitting there talking about, with a lot of people that was involved with him, and they went and they did this raid. It was Christmas, as traditionally, birth of Jesus and, all that, right? And they did this raid in Afghanistan. They killed some guys, and they went back, and like I said, he was very religious, and he was actually studying for the bar. So the dude was like,
thinking his
on
lawyer's
top of all of that,
why not?
On top of all of that, I'm going to go be a lawyer, right? And so one of his teammates like, how do you do what we do and believe in God? And then he's all like, okay, well, how do you do what we do, see the end result, and not believe in God? And then,
fair question.
They just kind of left at like a stalemate. It was really interesting, right? Obviously, it's a book about him, and he's not on the news, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously, he died in combat later on one of those tours. I'm not sure if it's the same one. But it was very, very interesting because the guy, he came out of nothing. He always was fighting demons. He always found ways to improve on himself. Yeah. He never accepted defeat. He just kept going and kept going. And, he had that religious part of him in which he never preached to anybody. But if somebody was willing to seek him out, he'd be willing to, discuss and, assist how he could. The more I talk about it, the more I realize it's very similar to Ben, actually. And so...
I think that's kind of the method like my friends at work, they know I go to church and stuff. I don't push it on them or anything, but if they ever want to talk about it, I'm open to talk about it. But I think if you want to influence someone towards religion or Christianity or whatever, you've got to have that relationship first. Like, best intentions or not, if I just come at you and say, Josh, you're going to hell, and you're going to be like, okay, screw off, leave me alone. Like, if I build a relationship and a friendship with you, and then you say, like, why do you seem happier? Why are you not struggling with this as much as I am or something? And be like, well, hey, it's because I've got this little extra bit of faith over here, and it's important to me, and I don't push it on people, but it's a part of me, and if you want to learn about it, I'll be more than happy to talk about it, and you'll have a much better chance of, oh, okay, because that's authentic. You see me as a human. I'm not trying to be better, holier than thou. You know my mistakes. I'm not better than anybody. I mess up just as much as anybody else, but I get up and I keep going. I think that's a trait I see as well in a lot of people that inspire us, is they get up and they keep going. And that's actually like why I named my fourth kid Benjamin Joshua. He's named after people that inspired me, and I can't wait till he grows up so I can tell him these stories. We named him Benjamin after Ben Wise, who we just talked about, and his middle name is Joshua, named after you, because you're one of those guys that inspires me, because I know your story over the last 20 years. I know you've had setbacks and difficulties, and you didn't get everything you wanted. And I remember asking you, how do you deal with that? And you said, well, it sucks sometimes, and you give yourself a day or a week or whatever to moan and piss and groan about it, but then you get up and you go again, and you try again. And you may not get, but that relentless determination of, okay, that part of life didn't go how we expected at all, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep going. That resiliency, I think a lot of people have it, or they learn it somehow along the way, and they just keep going.
First, I don't think that I ever rank enough to have a namesake or anything, but that's just me. I do love it, though.
I think it's cool. Like, my first son's named Jackson, and because that was as close as I could get to naming the kid Jack Bauer, and the wife vetoed John McClane. And so, like, obviously I was not as mature back then when I first started having kids. Like, I'm going to name kids after action heroes, like.
I think all of those were well choice.
Right, I think so too. But, I didn't win that battle. But, it's just like, I'm just trying to put more thought into it. Like, what's the meaning or a story behind it that maybe that can tell a story off someday versus, if I keep having 6, 7 kids, one of them might be just named after a sandwich, like you're the Subway Club or whatever.
I think a lot of people, they have this thing of like, oh, well, these people are just built like this. They're born this way. They have this mentality, right? And I was one of those. And it's about your tribe, your group. If you hang out with people that are just going to sit there and complain and be like, oh, yeah, man, you didn't get promoted. That sucks. That's BS,
which a lot
man.
of people do in the military.
Right.
You can get sucked into the bad groups real easy.
Exactly. You're not going to better yourself if you keep hanging out with those type of people. For me, it was my wife, because she's all like, she was the one who opened my eyes to it, because I'm sitting there like, why am I not getting promoted? Why is that guy getting promoted? And it wasn't like, what is that guy doing to get promoted? It's like, that's BS. That guy did this, like, blah, blah, woe is me. And then my wife was like, no, like, well, what do they do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they have a degree. Oh, well.
Maybe they were better than you and you don't want to see it.
Do you want to look at getting a degree? What about other schools? Some people, it appears that, they were born or they learn that at an early age. And some people, they learn it when they're in their mid-20s, like, or 30s, If you stay within this group that is not wanting you to do better, or not pushing you to get better, or just tells you, like, just gets on your bandwagon, like, oh, yeah, man, like, that's a bunch of BS. Like, what's up with that, you're not going to better yourself. And I mean, then what's the point of life if you're not just trying to better yourself? Because if you better yourself, you're going to better other people around you. You're not going to better people around you by sitting there complaining and talking about how, woe is me.
Isn't it crazy how our wives can actually be helpful and help us see a situation from a different perspective when we've thought about it for hundreds of hours and we're so certain that we've got it figured out, and they'll be like, have you thought about it like this? And be like, oh, well, I wanted you to be my echo chamber, and they're like, oh, but now that I hear what you said from a different perspective, that's actually really helpful, and I can relearn or repackage or reframe something and move forward past where you got stuck at something.
Yeah, you can have a friend that you barely talk to or something, and they'll say whatever, and you're like, okay, cool, but it doesn't really resonate till you have that spouse or that person that really means something that, they may say, what you don't want them to say, or you respect them to know that there's more behind it of why they think the way that they do, or, and
you have some credibility.
I mean, if you have that right team, you bettering yourself is going to better the team. And then everybody else in that team should be sitting there bettering themselves. And then, it's like this spider web, this network that just should be everybody's bettering each other.
Well, it's a snowball effect. If you can get in a group of, like there's, I have that in the civilian world. I got 3 buddies that I've worked with at multiple companies, and we thrive off of each other's success and drive, and we'll travel in herds to different companies because it's self-perpetuating. I succeed, it motivates you to succeed. And I've never got to be in some of those high op-tempo, high-speed groups like you have, and I imagine that by nature, you have to be a high-performing, highly driven, motivated person just to maintain and keep getting better so you're not falling behind the group. And then that also helps to continue to push the group as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's never a point where you just sit there and everything just clicks and you're good. You always have that fallback thing. Like, so my old troop commander, Nick, he actually came out and officiated my retirement. He had some really nice, kind words about me, and, I still, would push back, like, that wasn't me,
Mm-hmm.
But, you find these people that just want to better you, and, they say good things about you because it's true, not to butter yourself up.
Yeah.
And, so, like, I found myself trying to many times of, like, needing this positive reinforcement, and
I think that's something our generation struggles with in general.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm sitting there, like, needing something, and as soon as, I'd push it over to him. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And, if I'm doing a report or a brief or something, and, like, he'd have, like, this constructive criticism, and then, I go back and forth on, like, is this constructive criticism I'm wanting, or is this an attaboy? Mm-hmm. And then, because then if I need that attaboy, then I need this internal approval process. And then, I knew I was going to go back to where I was. So, I would gravitate to people like that the tribe. And a lot of people, some that term has been kind of getting out there and kind of iffy on reception, depending on where you're at, but
no, I get what you're saying. No, that's awesome though. I've definitely had a lot of similar things, learned my way through some stuff like that. All right, let's switch gears and we'll finish up. How do we feel about the new John Wick movie? John Wick 4. Chapter 4.
I'm excited. It just came out this weekend. We didn't get to watch it this weekend. I think we both are going to watch it within the next week.
Yep. I'm already looking at, can I go Monday night? Can I go Tuesday night? Or do I have to wait till Friday or Saturday?
I'm excited. There's parts of it. I really enjoyed the first one. It was a little bit more believable. Then it kind of started going out to kind of like the Rambo,
Mm-hmm.
like then he's just nuking a whole bunch of different people. But I really enjoy his character in it. I enjoy the gunplay and its realism in certain aspects.
Yes.
And I really enjoy that. And then I just love the whole, this dude has had everything taken away from him, and
you're still pushing him.
Like it's the same thing with John McClane, right?
I think a lot of guys like us like the authenticity of the gun stuff because we're familiar with that. It's not the stupid I shot 87 rounds out of a revolver before I reloaded type crap you see in some movies. And we Keanu is he's another authentic, good human being person. Everybody you hear stories about him tell him he's just the nicest guy. And he did months, if not years, of training for these movies. And so the gun manipulations and stuff is all accurate to a T. Like, that's what it looks like. Now, could you really win a firefight 1-on-85? Probably not, but in that rare case that it happened exactly the way that happened in the movie, sure, maybe you could win 1-on-85. But I interrupted you. Sorry, continue.
No. Exactly. Like I was watching it was an interview with Bruce Willis. He's talking about, I think it was like the fourth one, Die Hard, the Live Free and Die Hard or whatever.
The computer one. I liked that one.
Yeah.
Die Hard 5? No. 4 was good. 5 was not.
But he was sitting there and he's like, he's an ordinary guy that was just put into
extraordinary
circumstances, and he was forced to be a hero, right? Mm-hmm. Now, John Wick necessarily is not put that way, but I mean, the guy had a very sordid past, and I mean, so he's basically a hitman for the mob. So obviously, he was not a good dude, but like he put it away, he grew, and then first movie he was thrust back into it, and then the second one he was kind of locked in, and the decisions that he made was just kind of carrying forward. But I mean, the dude tried to get away. Yeah. And then now he's pulled back in, and it's always a good time.
I like that they're expanding more of that. You're learning more about the secret underworld, and just like that they slowly growing that part of the story. That part's kind of neat to me. So I'm very excited to see it too. I can't wait.
I remember watching the first one, and I was like, I didn't know if it was, like from a comic book type thing, because I was like, it just seemed like there's this whole world. Underneath that, like, I didn't understand. They're doing these gold coins and these. Yeah,
and they hint at it, kind of like the first Matrix movie. They hint at a lot of it before you learn more of the world and the story.
Yeah, so it's cool sitting to see how it's all kind of unfolding, and
that's just good storytelling, and it's a good violent action movie.
Yes,
we love violence.
Violence is the best.
All right, last 2 questions. Top 5 favorite war movies, if you can think of them.
Black Hawk Down. 100%. That came out right when I was getting ready to enlist in the Army. Mm-hmm. John Wayne's Green Berets.
I don't think I've watched that one.
Shame on you.
I don't watch a lot of the older ones.
I enjoyed, and I'll get some backlash from this, but I enjoyed the Act of Valor.
Yeah? It was decent.
Like they put active duty Navy SEALs in for the actors. It was kind of horrible, but like every time they shoot somebody, it was always a headshot. Like, I mean, it was kind of annoying, but it had enough authenticity for me that I could enjoy it. Yeah. So I was fine with that. Oh, jeez. I mean, they've done more war, Vietnam ones. What if we do not necessarily war, but yeah. So I got 3 right now. Those are probably my 3. I could probably come up with 2 more.
Right. I'll throw out my 5 and see if that jogs your memory. All right. So I as well have Black Hawk Down on there. I actually just watched it again last week. I still have 20 more minutes to go finish. I will watch that probably once a year, usually if not on Veterans Day or what's the one, Memorial Day. I would usually just sit down and watch a war movie and process, because I have strong feelings about, because like you, I've lost friends in the military. We had 2 people in my unit kill themselves over a period of 2 years, and like that's a rough thing that the military struggles with. We lost a command sergeant major in the division since we've been home already. Like it's freaking nuts. It's hard. There's a lot of struggle out there. I got sidetracked. Sorry. But Black Hawk Down is one of my favorites of all time. I watched that a lot. It's so gritty, so realistic, just chaos of combat. I can only imagine, having not done that's somewhat close.
I've had the honor of meeting a couple of dudes that were there for Gothic Serpent.
I had to give a report on one of the 2 guys, the E8s that came down to guard the crashed pilot, and they got the Medal of Honor posthumously.
Shugard and Gordon?
Yeah, Gordon. And that's just some inspirational, good stuff. And just like, oh, I'm going to go die, and I'm going to go do it anyways, like, for just another dude. That's heavy, and that resonates with people like us a lot. So that's one of my favorites. I really like Lone Survivor. I watched that one a lot too. I think it was pretty well done. It's a good story. And then I really liked the 12 Horsemen one, a little newer, with what's his name? Thor. Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, Hemsworth. And then for Vietnam, I really like We Were Soldiers, the Mel Gibson one. That's a classic. And then I was struggling to find a fifth, so I was like, well, I need to go back and watch it again. It's been a long time, but I was like, I'm pretty sure just for the D-Day World War II part, the Saving Private Ryan is up there as well.
Yeah.
So those were my 5 that I picked. I looked at some lists and I was like, oh, I haven't seen half these movies. I should probably go watch more.
I agree with all those. Saving Private Ryan, actually, during my retirement, I made a joke that was like my first real war movie.
Mm-hmm.
Big one that I watched. I watched it with my mom, so I told her that all of my journey was because of her. So that is 100% definitely on my list. And yeah, I mean, Lone Survivor, 12 Horsemen. I mean, those were all good. I mean, those are all solid choices.
There's some I've seen, like, I need to go back and rewatch them, like Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, that I remember being decent. What's the one Vietnam one where the guy's like, I love napalm in the morning, smell of
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now. I didn't like that one that much.
Yeah,
it was too slow paced for me,
hit or miss.
boring.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad was like, you don't like that movie? And I was like, not really. But anyways, yeah, lots of good movies out there. All right, last question. How many countries have you been to, and you don't have to name them, just if you can come up with a number, in your last 20 years since we started being grown-ups, air quotes? Because we get older, we don't necessarily grow up.
So
Probably more than
in
me.
and out of work?
Yeah, just in your life journey. How many? I'm at 11 now. I've been to 11 countries. I guess if you include USA. Or which continents have you not been to? Might be a better way to be a question.
I think I did like 14 or 15.
14 or 15? Nice.
Yeah. And then continents. I'm trying to think about how the continents are broken up. To, like what categorizes.
Right. Well, I know you've been to South America. You go to Brazil a lot. So
I've been South America, Central, North, Asia, Africa, Europe.
I haven't got Africa yet.
Is
Done Europe. I don't. Does Kuwait and Jordan, that Southwest
that's
Asia,
Southwest
fall under
Asia, I think.
fall under Asia?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're...
I'm not a fan of the Middle East. I'll say that. They can keep it.
Yeah, not a big
It's like,
fan.
you guys know there's nicer places to live, like Colorado, or
Yeah, 1 out of 5 stars would not recommend.
would not recommend. It's like, you guys can keep this place.
And I'm a really horrible geologist, but is Australia... That is a joke.
Oh, I was like, geology's dirt, rotten rocks, dude. It was like...
I do that or I say geometry.
Geometry.
What does Australia fall under?
I think it's its own continent. Or that fake, like,
Is that
Indo-Pac China, or
there's like 7, right?
Pacific, South Pacific area. 7, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Maybe it falls under...
That's what I'm wondering. Like, somehow they group certain things in.
They probably changed it, like the Pluto planet,
Yeah,
or the new
probably,
math,
depending
whatever.
on the year. Yeah, new math. Yeah, that was one area in which I haven't gotten down to yet.
I would like to go to Australia. I'd like to go back to Europe. I think it's awesome. I think it's good to go see other cultures and just helps you be more open-minded. Not necessarily have to change what you believe, but just be willing to hear people and see how they live, and it's different, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different, and you can learn from people. I sat in Jordan at Petra with a Bedouin guy and had tea and talked for 30 minutes, and I learned stuff, Not something I ever thought I would do. Yeah,
I mean, you meet the craziest people if you have an opportunity and you seize it. A little bit out there, but like I met with, his name is escaping me, but he was the founder of the Free Burma Rangers in a random apartment in Kurdistan. It just I'm hanging out with a guy and he's like, oh hey man, when you meet this guy, maybe you talk about things, and went up there and sat there and hung out like all afternoon, just talking with this guy. But like with his group, he had a pastor with him, and he was Filipino, I think. Like all these different people of different walks of life, different countries, ethnicities, and you talk with them and you start learning things, and that's what we talked about before. It's like getting our kids out.
Yeah.
And experiencing the world and understanding that things are different. Not like, hey, these kids have it worse than you,
Right.
So they appreciate things, but just to let them know, like, there's a bigger
big
world than Missouri or Maryland.
Yeah.
Like being able to understand more about other people, like make people better,
Yeah. I love traveling. I love taking my kids traveling, and I hope that they learn from it and stuff. So it's good times. So go travel. Travel the world. Don't stay home.
Even if you can't travel the world, just travel the United States.
Yeah. There's cool and interesting people to meet. And that's coming from a non-people person right here. All right, man. That covers all the main stuff I want to talk about. I know we can sit here and talk for hours. We've been talking for the last 4 days, just hanging out. But I thought it might be cool for people to kind of listen and get to know my friend Josh a little bit and kind of hear some of our stories and stuff. And so I want to say thank you for doing this with me. It's something silly and fun. I love to do creative stuff. It might take me a week to get this put up, but it's just fun to sit here and talk and tell stories. And, I bet some people will find it interesting. So I just do it for fun. And so it's been fun. I've been glad to come out and hang out. Thanks for sitting down and doing this interview with me.
I appreciate it. And I've enjoyed it. I've always wondered what it would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'm happy you've been able to come up here for this weekend. It was great. I needed it. We had some good times. And
yeah,
it's been awesome.
All right. Well, we will call it on that. We'll catch you all later.